Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and I've got a really great broadcast set up for you. And I'm as excited for this as anybody because I really haven't gotten a chance to talk to the founder of theconsciousresistance.com. And I really think that there is so much for me and Derek Bros to be talking about. Go follow him at dbros live free, especially because he's got a bigger perspective than I do. He's down in Mexico. We really did not talk much about coronavirus in the sense that it was going to come to the United States at all, and that there would be some kind of a global lockdown. I think what we spoke about probably 4 months ago, right? I think December was the last time we did a video together.
Yeah, it's been a few months. December sounds about right.
Yeah, December sounds about right. So, Derek, I guess let's start with your Corona journey with this, because a lot of people have changed their opinions. I certainly never thought it was going to come here. I've kind of taken a stance now that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, that this is in fact real, a bioweapon. It may not be as lethal as people think, but in a condensed area like New York City, it is taking those lives. A lot of people think that those lives aren't real or they're inflating the numbers. I can assure you they're not. There are those in the alternative media that think it is 5G. There are those that think that there is no virus at all. What is your spectrum, and take me through your thought process and leaving the country?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me back on, brother.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, things have gotten very crazy the last couple months. Probably maybe the height of craziness since 9/11, at least. I am in Mexico. I'll start there before I kind of give a little bit about my personal journey on my beliefs about this. Because like you, I'm pretty certain that we're dealing with some sort of engineered virus bioweapon. I saw your last video talking about that, and I tend to agree with that assessment.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I am in Mexico, so if I look really blurry or the connection's bad, it's because connection's not great everywhere in Mexico. I'm not ready to say where I am yet, but I will tell you guys a little bit about why I came here. I came mainly to get away from what's going on in the U.S. because of what I anticipated was going to be happening, but also because my focus has really been to try to build over the years. We've talked about this. Freedom cells is a big concept that I'm promoting. Decentralized, small, organized groups, people coming together. I've also had plans for a while to build an intentional community, and that's what I'm out here. Looking for land, working with other people who are interested in similar ideas. And the plan was for me to do this at the end of 2020, but due to everything happening, we had to speed things up. So I came out here just over, I think it'll be 5 weeks this Thursday that I've been in Mexico now. And I'm, of course, from Houston. And I could start to see that things were getting locked down. There was a lot of tension in the grocery stores, and things were getting a little too weird for me. And I felt like, you know what, I'm just going to speed up this project I've had in mind. I'm going to come out here, start building intentional community, looking at land, and play things by ear. And, my partner, Miriam, she's got family out here as well, so we're just visiting some family, visiting some friends, and so now we are set up. We got a house here for the next 30 days, and we're with some other activists that we know out here, and we're just scouting for land as often as we can. I will say, without giving away my location at the moment, that we are starting to see checkpoints. We are starting to see I went to a grocery store last night, and you couldn't get in unless you were wearing a mask, and they wanted to do the little temperature gun in your face, and that's something that I'm not willing to do. So we turned right around and left. I'm just not ready to submit to that at the moment, and I don't think that I will. Thankfully, though, where I'm at, and we're really in lots of Mexico, there's these huge indoor and sometimes outdoor markets where, people think there might be a food shortage in some places, but it's a good feeling to go into one of these markets and there's just food wall to wall, all these local vendors, a lot of people who, the Mexican people need to work. They can't completely shut down the country like the U.S. and elsewhere. It seems like it's starting to come here. We're starting to see the cops driving around in this little caravan, making announcements, telling people to stay inside if you don't have to. But at the same time, we go on walks every day, and people are out doing their thing. People are working. Some businesses are shut down. Some people are wearing masks, and like I said, some places are starting to require them. But for the most part, people just ask you to put hand sanitizer on before you come into a business. But I don't think that things will, well, I'm hoping, and I don't believe things are going to get much worse than this, because as the president of Mexico has stated, for whatever his word is worth, that, you know, the Mexican people just can't afford to. There's plenty of people, a vast majority, like in some parts of the country, that live on less than $2 a day, that simply can't afford not to go out and sell their fruit or sell their tacos or sell whatever it is they create or they make or whatever service they offer, which is a lot of what Mexico is about. It's people offering services and trading goods or just different things of that sort, you know, and they are not the type of population that has $10,000 in the bank to just stop working for, you know, a couple of weeks or even a couple of days. And some people, if they don't work one day, they might not eat, you know, for a few days after that. And so it's it's a
Derek,
different situation.
even
Yeah.
in San Antonio, you saw the lines only within, 4 to 6 weeks of a lockdown for people lining up for miles for beans and rice. Something that I suggested in the very beginning. Hey, at least protect yourself that way. Get yourself some storable food so you don't end up in that situation. You can get it for pennies on the dollar now. And people laughed at me. And, I'm happy to say that the military did not lock New York City in, even though that seems to be the epicenter. I'm happy to say that Cuomo pushed back on the military in Rhode Island going door to door and looking for New Yorkers. That was a good thing. I'm not happy that you still can't get a gun. You can't get a pistol permit, basically, in New York. New Jersey pushed back on that, and they got their gun shops open. So I am glad to see a pushback. What I think that people are having a hard time with, and going back to your thoughts on the virus, is that this can be a real bioweapon that's released on the people, and I'm not for a lockdown. I'm for a separate solution. You know what I mean? I've never called for that, but the reality is that in denser populations, this thing flourishes. And there is an older populace in New York and a lot of places. We've seen how it has devastated nursing homes. The Boston Globe had 15 pages of obituaries this Sunday. I can assure you that's not normal. So what do you think? First of all, what do you think? How do you think we convey this to people, that it is a virus, and B, that the solution is outside of a police state?
Well, that's a good question, brother. I mean, I think that, well, one thing first, and I know you've talked about, obviously you did a great job actually playing and watching through all the Event 201 videos, and you've made sure your audience is aware of the flood strategy. I did a video last week where the head of the UN actually said those specific words and said it's time for us to flood, the public with authoritative sources and credible information. So I think we are witnessing the very push of the flood going on right now. They're trying to flood us with authoritative, credible sources, but I also think that we're getting flooded with a lot of purposeful disinformation right now. You mentioned some of the 5G stuff, and I spent quite a bit of time talking about 5G and the actual effects of 5G and the dangers of EMF exposure and radio frequency radiation exposure, and then also sometimes trying to debunk some of the less than credible stories out there. I actually, before we started here, I'm working on a video today that I'll put out later on this afternoon about the 60 gigahertz claim and how that potentially or supposedly relates to COVID-19. And to try to look a little deeper into that, because often, I think you're very aware of this, with disinformation or misinformation, it's not always just complete fake, just like the mainstream. There's mix of truth, enough truth that people keep going and keep listening, like, oh yeah, that's true, I know that's true. And then the rest of it, they sort of just accept because, they want to believe it. And I think we're seeing a lot of that, man. And unfortunately, people like myself, you and others who are pushing back on some of the less than credible claims, we're even getting hatred from our audience in some cases, where people are attacking us for, yeah, and I'm okay with it. Like I kind of get a little fuel from it, because I mean, I'm hoping that some of these people are actually just paid trolls or not even real, they're bots, right?
Well,
and
I don't
not
think,
that,
all right, so here's the
they're
deal.
not this dim,
Especially with the numbers aspect. I understand where we've been hoaxed so many times with these pandemics before that they wouldn't understand this. I also understand that if you go by the official counts in the United States, and I've always said this, although they are skewing the numbers, it's a lot harder to hide those numbers in a first world nation. That's how you got the numbers out of Italy and Spain, and you're like, okay, all right, now this is something that's not just going to be done in China or Iran. Let's take a look at this, right? Is the fact that if you go to the death toll today, I think it's nationwide under 900, right, Derek? Now,
Yeah.
in New York, it's almost 500. So you have New York State. Now, the vast majority of those 500, by the way, 90% of them are either in New York City or in Long Island on that little speck in New York State. Now, and I'm going to show this. Let's do this live, okay? United States map. We'll do, and this is where my frustration is, that people can't buy it because they don't see it, and a lot of people, Derek, and you probably know this. You travel a lot. When you say that you are from New York, everybody assumes that you're from New York City, and the rest of New York is just like New York City. So everybody, look. Now you see this giant thing right here. That is New York. Okay, so in New York State, they're saying today a little less than 500 deaths. Okay, now in New York City are 470 of those deaths, and that's down here. That's that little thing in the water right there. This is the rest of the country, and only 400 other people have died reported. So I get the skepticism, but in a condensed place, this is not normal. And the other thing is we've talked about is, let's say for a second, by the way, Derek, that this thing is just as deadly as the flu, right? Say it's 0.1% fatality rate. Well, what if you look at these numbers, there are so many asymptomatic people, because it's as deadly as the flu, but it's five times as contagious. Out of 397 homeless people tested, okay, in the Boston area, Derek, 146, 36% came up positive. None of them showed any signs of the sickness. Zero. All asymptomatic carriers. So obviously that's going to bring your death percentage down. But if it's that contagious, more people are going to die from it. And that's what I think we're seeing. You know, I remember a lot of people. Well, they were speculating, oh, no, we got to close the borders from Mexico because once they get here, they're going to be. I'm like, those people have good immune systems. They overall aren't overweight and on high fructose corn syrup all the time. I'm like, the number one comorbidity in the United States, in New York City, is obesity. 100%. That is what's killing the most people. And I mean, I get the skepticism, but it's obviously here. So other than the lockdown, other than the militarization, what do we have to do? Do we have to spread that, this thing, number one, is already widely spread, and it's, we need to treat it with something other than a vaccine and checkpoints?
Well, so I want to back up a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that I agree with everyone who is skeptical of the numbers. I don't necessarily agree with their conclusions, but I agree, with the general skepticism of, like you said, we've been lied to plenty of times by official sources, CDC, World Health Organization, the government, the president, all these sorts of people. So I get why people don't trust it. I think some people are motivated for more political reasons, like they want to defend Trump. So, of course, the other people who are claiming it's bad are just trying to hurt Trump. And, people have their biases, and that's going to feed into there. But when it comes down to the actual information, I've really tried to, other than trying to do some debunking on the 5G COVID, I've tried to explore various aspects of that. So, for example, a couple of days ago, I interviewed Dr. Stephanie Seneff, and she is from MIT. She put out a really awesome paper that some would say controversial, that is pointing to the potential for glyphosate to be playing a major role in this, because she talks about the hotspots in different parts of the world are near water runoff, but they're also near high traffic areas. And so she talks about the potential not only for glyphosate runoff in the soil and the water and that affecting people, but for the potential for glyphosate, which is also contained, on corn, and then corn's turned into ethanol, and that's turned into fuel. And she's calling for more studies to find out if glyphosate, if that molecule survives, the whole process, and when it comes out the vehicle in the form of exhaust, if that is still glyphosate, that that molecule has maintained integrity and is still the same. Because if so, then that means it's another source of glyphosate into the air, into people's lungs, and that could be making people sick. Now, of course, she's being called a screwball by some in the mainstream for even proposing alternative ideas out there. But she also emphasized, I asked her about radio frequency radiation. And, we do know that radio frequency radiation harms the immune system. We do know that it breaks down the cell walls and can cause cell death in extreme cases. So when you're dealing with all these environmental factors, I also went over a recent paper about 5G last week that talked about that most of the studies on 5G and EMFs are incorrect because they study these effects in a lab. They're not studying them in real world conditions where you're surrounded by a smartphone, a laptop, a cell tower, a smart TV, all these kinds of things, in addition to other environmental toxins. And so that creates this synergistic effect. So you start thinking of fluoride in the water and glyphosate in the soil and in the water, other chemical exposures, plus, like you mentioned, people's obesity and just, shitty diet and physical exercise, lack of physical exercise, in addition to exposure with RFR, then that could create a situation where people are more susceptible to an illness or a virus, like you said, that can spread faster. So that's kind of where my mind is at, and that doesn't exclude the possibility, and I think the likely possibility, that this is engineered in some way. And it's just, there's so many different competing theories that people cannot keep up with it, and I'm seeing people hold theories that are often conflicting with each other because they're trying to hold their little world view together instead of just accepting that none of us know the pure truth at the moment. There's a lot of bad information out there. I see lots of people referencing Thomas Cowan and Dr. Andrew Kaufman. I'm going to be interviewing him tomorrow as well. He's one of the people that are out there claiming that viruses aren't real, that it's germ theory versus terrain theory, and that viruses are just excretions of toxins out of our cells, what they call exosomes. That hasn't been proven. It's obviously a theory counter to the mainstream, and I noticed that some of the audience, if it's against the mainstream, well, then it must be true, right? If the mainstream says it's fake, then it's automatically true, and that's not how things work. And also, I've noticed people think if a video gets censored, that must mean it's also true. So there's just this whole event, in addition to the kind of conversation about the virus itself or just the pandemic, it is exposing huge weaknesses. It is exposing that the police state is marching forward, the technocracy is marching forward, but it's also exposing that lots of our audiences do not have critical thinking skills. And people can be offended by that if they like, but I see it all over my channel, yours, Last American Vagabond, Corbett, etc. People who just are attacking the researchers who are trying to stick to credible evidence, but then they're really willing to just believe anything from any random YouTuber that just sits in front of a camera and talks and doesn't provide any kind of information. And there's, I don't want to get into naming names and kind of turn it into that sort of thing, but there's a lot of bad channels out there right now that are growing and getting lots of attention, and people are just swallowing it up and sharing it, and it's making things more difficult.
And that's fine, because you know what? Those are the ones that they can promote. And, during this, just like during Event 201, they're pushing these authoritative voices, and then they're not suppressing those that are reporting the truth. For instance, I was one of the first people I can tell, even before Dr. Seidel came out with his viral video, that 80% of people on ventilators, I was saying 70 to 90% in the hospitals, because I was talking to somebody at Stony Brook, somebody in Queens, someone in Brooklyn, that if you were on a ventilator, 70 to 90% chance you were done, depending on the hospital. And even Cuomo now talks about 80% if you're on a ventilator. I was one of the first people talking about the use of steroids on top of the vitamin C, because that was part of the intravenous thing. They're using hydroprednisolone down there now. So, I've tried to keep it credible. I'm actually trying to save lives and not get, subscribers, because I couldn't give a fuck. And during this, you know what? They demonetized my entire channel. So, I've got a GoFundMe. If you want to support Derek, please do so as well. I don't know if they hit you too, but they hit just about everybody I know within a week's time. They hit Luke and I at the same time.
I probably would have been hit, but I've never monetized my channel.
Oh, snap. Oh. Well, the thing is, I've got 0 strikes on anything. I'm a member in good standing since 2007 when I made that channel. I have 1,100 plus videos, and because my focus is now on this subject, because how could it not be? It's a global subject. It's affected just about everything. That's another thing that I predicted, that aside from the economics, the global impact would be huge, the stock market impact would be huge, and the predator class impact would be huge. And let's talk about that. I'm seeing a consolidation of power as we speak. I'm seeing Amazon and Walmart do well. You know what I'm saying? While the oil markets are in complete chaos. For the first time ever, Derek, for the first time ever, oil closed at negative $37 a barrel. And in all this, because you were a little late and I forgot to tell my audience and you, we're 20 minutes deep, it's in the headline. I want to mention this. Talk about control of the internet. Around 1 a.m. last night, someone hacked and leaked thousands of emails and passwords for the CDC, the WHO, NIH, the World Bank, and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, this was available via Pastebin. This post is now 12 hours old, as you can see. And if you look through it, there were certainly people that were scared to go in, but they definitely did. And think about whoever posted this. Whoever posted all these emails and addresses themselves obviously had access or could have given that access previously to someone else to get all that information before they released it to the public. Try finding any information out about this. I was tipped off to this by a friend of mine who was on the Chan boards and was asking me if I'd read the documents yet. And I was like, what documents? And then there's just there's nothing. There's nothing there. I actually, Gary Franchi of Next News Network had texted me for another reason, and I texted him. I think he may report on it. I sent it over to the InfoWars crew, and a lot of people are like, Jason, why are you doing that? Because they have big audiences. Because they have big audiences, guys. And this channel has been more suppressed than ever. I'm sure you're kind of feeling that as well. Despite the growth. I mean, what are your thoughts, again, on the predator class now absorbing things, where this goes economically, and what our future looks like, a month from now?
Well, no, man, I hadn't seen those emails. That's pretty crazy. I definitely, if anybody has those, send them over to me as well. If you can find them, I would love to look through that. As far as what you mentioned with Amazon, Walmart, let's see, obviously Facebook, obviously Netflix, a lot of the technocratic companies, the technocrats and the big wireless, big tech, they're benefiting hugely from this, right? They're 5G is rolling forward. It's being fast-tracked by Trump and his administration. They're pushing all that forward. Again, everybody's on Netflix. Everybody's using Amazon. Everybody's using Facebook. Everybody's at home right now. To some degree, that has been a positive thing because I'm sure you've seen a little bit of bump that right now people are at home looking for content. Again, they're finding lots of bad information because of the flood. They're finding authoritative sources. But overall, people are questioning the narrative, and that's a positive thing. But at the same time, this is solidifying the foundation of the technocratic state. I released a book which is available for free a couple months back called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. It was even prior to COVID-19. I released it in late January, and I wrote it last year. And I had no idea this pandemic was about to happen, of course, but I did see that the technocracy has been coming into view for more than a few years now, but even more into view the last year with the implementation of the 5G smart grid, which is basically going to be the backbone to the Internet of Things, which is a part of the overall infrastructure, which again, the smart house, smart TV, smart fridge, smart toaster, everything interconnected, easy to hack, easy to survey, easy to monitor, as well as pushing of really cool things like virtual reality and augmented reality, but overall just that push towards technocracy where the technocrats, the scientific elite, are the ones that are in control. And I mean, look at the people that are rushing to the rescue and that are being promoted as the heroes right now. Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, Bezos, Elon Musk to some degree. And you can look into his family history that goes back to the Social Credit Party in Canada. So, I mean, these people have, and their families have been around for, obviously we know, for generations. And I think we're at a point now with this pandemic, this virus, whatever people's theories on it, we can all agree that this is being used as a way to march things forward. And also, I think, to take away some traction on some other stories. And I mean, I know you covered the recent news on the Epstein case, and I've been talking about that recently as well. And there are plenty of other important stories that, not to come out with the usual trope of, oh, this is a distraction from this, but in some ways it is. In some ways, the 24-hour round-the-clock coverage of COVID-19 now is taking away from any coverage, even in some alternative media channels. There's a lot to talk about, but it's important for us to realize there's other things happening. And even under the guise of COVID-19, I mean, I did an article yesterday, and I pulled up 20 or 30 articles within a matter of moments from mainstream. All we're talking about the expansion of facial recognition, thermal scanners, drones, this and that. A few questioning and kind of asking, should we just rush into this? But for the most part, just talking about it kind of plainly, like it's no big deal, that this is the world we're rushing into. And we are witnessing, again, the foundation of this technocratic state. And I think it's going to be very difficult, just like 9/11, to just turn around and make these things go away. And I think that's where a lot of people's skepticism is coming in. But, you know, the virus can be real. It can be causing some deaths, but maybe not as bad as we're being told. And it can also be engineered, and they can also be using it to take away our liberties and to roll out the technocratic state. You know, all those things can coexist at once. And I think that's difficult for some people to see. It doesn't have to be completely fake in order to understand that they're using it to, you know, to their advantage.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody I've seen in the Predator class has survived this thing. Even Boris Johnson, supposedly, who had the worst go of it. I've yet to see a Hollywood celebrity go down. I've yet to see an athlete go down. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, you are seeing people who were overweight or had comorbidities in their 20s, 30s, etc. It's less likely than the elderly, certainly taking out a lot of old people. But, you know, I sent this site to Corbett today because, again, James Corbett does great work. Some people were trying to like make it into you need to challenge him on this. He's going to set you straight. And I'm like, listen, I respect all of his work, and I sent him this site. And anybody can do the math. You can get it through the day, but you can go to just New York City Health and just type in New York City Health COVID. And again, as of March 11th through April 17th, that's 37 days. There were 22,374 deaths. Now, at the average rate, okay, and this is just New York City, by the way. This is not the rest of the state. But again, the rest of the state outside of New York City accounts for a lot less than this. I'm not sure if they're putting in, it doesn't look like they're even putting in Long Island. So that is about a quarter of the other ones, okay? Now, on average, say 149 people. Let's up that from the 5,513 to 6,000 people. All right, 6,000 just minus 22,000 means on average you had 18,000 deaths. Now, they're not even confirming that those are 18,000 COVID patients. Only 8,500 are there as COVID. They have the probable one, sure, but then there's 9,000 people that are completely unknown. You know, and not all those guys are going to test positive. But if you look at the discrepancy on average, obviously anything over double the number, which would be roughly 11,000, should be alarming to people. Okay. And, you know, again, I also sent, where is it? You know, anybody can get the full years, 2017, 2016, full year. And pneumonia, which is if you died of the flu, basically, you developed pneumonia from the flu and died, yearly is 4,170 people. It's like 4,300 the year before, 4,400. You know, it never hits even that 5,000 mark within the last 5 or 6 years. So again, you'd have to believe that not only the 17,000 or what is it? The 17, 18,000 person discrepancy really isn't real, but that of those confirmed cases that are COVID, if let's say they were lying about 4,000 plus of them, where are the other 4,000 coming from? You know, just in 37 days and not a year. You know, remember, guys, there was a winter before this, too. Like, that's just the last 37 days. So, and I shouldn't, and people were ragging on me for laughing. I'm just laughing out of, like, I don't know what else to do. You know,
well, can I comment on that, Jason?
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the? Because I'm sure you've covered it. I might have missed it, or you at least I'm sure have come across it. But what do you think about the? There was a senator / doctor from Minnesota who was talking about the CDC and also the CD. It's on the CDC's website where they said something along the lines of, you know, deaths that are either caused by or assumed to be caused by COVID-19 should be written on the death certificate. Because what I've noticed is that's where a lot of the skepticism is coming from, is folks have seen that. And so when they look at a number like that, they're like, well, yeah, of course, the CDC has already said, assume it to be COVID, even if you don't have hard evidence. What are you thinking about that?
Well, all right. So like, I can only speak to the people, at least firsthand, that I've talked to, right? So just talking to, and even my military buddy yesterday, he's National Guard. He's a medic. This was his he just did what was going to be his last training, but they activated his unit. They sent half to Schenectady, half to New York City. Half the ones to New York City are there to move the bodies. Okay. And when I was seeing, again, pictures and video of teams picking up bodies from home, because remember, we said that 9,000 plus unknown, Remember, all those counted ones are either hospitals or nursing homes for the most part that they're saying could be COVID. Okay, one or the other. They were picking up 280 bodies, almost twice the number that used to die in New York City a day from their homes. And I went down and, in this video here, it's featured the morgue, but I encourage anybody to do this. This actually shows you, and I'm going to take the audio off here, how the death certificates actually go. And it's not what people think. They think that they just mark them COVID. But let me see if I can get this
examiner's office has to clear the cause of death on the death certificate.
So now what's happening is doctors that don't have confirmed case of COVID, they're putting pneumonia. So now they're not accepting this cause of death. So we have to wait to get the right cause of death that would be cleared for cremation.
It's taking up to 3 days to get a death certificate fixed.
All right. So again, what they are doing is they have a 3-day clearing process. And if they don't test positive for pneumonia and they do test positive for COVID, that's how they're changing it. So obviously, the information that they're just marking everybody down as COVID is not true. If it's taking 3 days to get a death certificate, that story's over a week old. Okay? And, I saw that time and time again. There's actually a pretty good, I put together a Google Doc. But there's also, for instance, the big argument was that pneumonia had just completely gone away. You saw this graphic all over the place, right? That drop. Everybody was posting that. But again, if you had done just the slightest bit of research and looked, you notice how that bottom one goes up and this is way before. This is 2017 through 2018. You see where it's going? 2019. So in actuality, that one just takes a while to actually get up to those other reportings because it's lagging in reporting. So if you look at these again, yeah, it looks like they've dropped off, but when we get another few days out, it's gonna come back up again. You see that? You understand what I'm saying? So a lot of these things, and you can check that out, are just complete hogwash. But again, I get it because what's happening? The vast majority are dying in a region of the world that is so tiny and people are so foreign to. When I tell people I'm from New York, that big state we just saw, they assume it's New York City, which is only a part of that little island that's in the water. Again, yeah. I know that you understand that, Derek.
So the trend, though, is that you were showing there in the graph is that there's a decline that does happen, but then it tends to come back up.
No, it's not even a decline.
Or the reporting catches up, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Even if you look at the blue line here, look at where it starts. Now, if you look, that same line, where is it? Right here. Boom. You see what I'm saying? It's always going to take that much longer for it to hit every time. And they're just, again, the bottom one's always on the bottom, and then it comes back up. Nowhere are you actually, in other words, in a week, going to see the spike dropped here and then it go back up here. You know what I'm saying?
All this stuff is happening. I'm kind of making a full circle because obviously the same test that was used being used for COVID is the same test you use to detect HIV. Mm-hmm. And, there's some interesting things that you might have come across, like Kerry Mullis, who's the guy who won the Nobel Prize for designing the test, him coming out later and speaking out and saying that he thought that it could easily be used and could be manipulated to detect false positives. And I got to get into the deep of that on my own to really be able to recite it specifically, but that's basically the gist of what he's saying. Sure. And then there are just other people who are pointing out, and this again tends to people who think the virus isn't real. I don't think that the virus isn't real. I'm not sold on
I get
that theory, but I do think that when people see this, that there might be problems with the PCR test. The guy who created it said it himself, and here's some other people talking about that. Then they make the leap. Well, that means that there is no virus, right? So I think that there's just so much going on right now. And of course, the mainstream doesn't want to allow any discussion that could potentially take away from their narrative, which is that all of this is worth shutting the economy down. It's worth locking you up. It's worth taking away your liberties. So they don't even want to allow anything. I mean, even just to kind of talk about some of the solutions you were mentioning a little bit ago, I interviewed Dr. Richard Cheng yesterday about vitamin C. He's having this is a doctor working in Shanghai on intravenous vitamin C clinical trials on treating COVID patients, and he's having his YouTube videos taken down. Mm-hmm. I mean, because he's talking about scientific trials that he's running. And so my point is that I think that there is some effort to shut down some of the healthy discussion. And as I mentioned earlier, the healthy discussion is being overwhelmed by by just kind of crackpot stuff, that it truly is like just, I think, baseless. But yeah, what do you think about the whole PCR test itself?
I agree. It's very flawed. So let's talk about that. I actually discussed that with Dr. Shiva and what exactly they were talking about, whether it be RNA strands, PCR test. We were talking about whether the swab or the blood test, etc. But what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of this, there is no like COVID-19. Right there, it's a certain form of COVID, and then they look at the symptoms. Now, the question becomes, right? Would the flu take away your sense of smell or your sense of taste too? That's not there. So they're going off of things like that based on tests. My own cousin, she's my age. She's a little bit younger, not obese or anything like that. She's never been sick like she was 3-4 weeks ago. Okay, now it took her 3 times. She's, by the way, down in Dutchess County, okay? So close to Rockland, Orange, the city, 40, 50 miles out. Takes her 3 times. She tests. They test her with a swab test, right? She comes back negative. Now, they tell her she had pneumonia. She said she'd never felt more awful. Now, they call her up over a week and a half ago now, Derek. And they tell her to come to the Bear Mountain facility, where I've shown pictures. People have watched this. So the Bear Mountain facility, which is one of the makeshift testing facilities the military did put up in New York State. All right. Now, when she got up there, she said her radio was out, the FM and AM radio was out, and that she had no internet. So she just took a picture and she sent it to me later. There she took another test. Now, she feels fine. And usually you're the one calling them for the tests. On Tuesday of this week, or last week, 1 week ago today, she says she tested positive. They called her back and tested positive. So now she's quarantined at her house for 2 weeks, etc. But she feels fine. So I think that the testing is extremely flawed. I think the reason that they called her back in the first place is because they thought that there was a chance that she may have tested positive, right? That's a big chance. On top of that, there may have been a chance that I thought maybe they were going to test her for the antibodies, because we're talking about that as well. All of it seems flawed to me. All of it. Now, when you go back to the beginning of March, some of the things I was showing was one of the ways they were doing mass detections and diagnoses of this via China was they were doing actual lung scans, okay? They were taking x-rays of lungs, and then they were putting those through an algorithmic machine to detect the type of lung damage that this was doing. Because that seems to be the big differential, right? That pneumonia and the flu do something very different to the lungs than what this does. And that's why ventilators aren't working. That's why most of those people die, etc., because you're not really treating a pneumonia type virus. And that's what Siddell said. So I think that's what we're seeing. I think that's only happening in the worst cases where it attacks the immune system to the point where it is filling your lungs up. We've talked about the reports, again, even coming out of China for mid-March, that this is what? A SARS and AIDS-like COVID virus, right? It's like a combination of SARS and AIDS, and what? Can do irreversible cystic fibrosis-like damage to your lungs. So what we've still not talked about in the United States, and I think where we're really behind the curve, is that the only way we're actually going to test if somebody actually has or suffered from this post-mortem is to look at their lung damage, right? Because but the other thing is, some of these people go into sepsis. And most people from infections aren't going to go into sepsis and die from the flu again. So I think there's a lot of varying degrees on this. On top of that, what? I've talked about this being around a long time, the different strains, not necessarily mutations, but variants of one another in biowarfare. There seems to be a lot out there that not only is there an A, but a B and a C strain now, right? So there's a ton of questions here. But one of the things that I'm not questioning anymore is that this thing is real and taking lives in some form. And yeah. And again, for the people don't understand, if you have a bad go of it and you survive, it's going to damage your lungs for a long time. And now they're saying what? They're reporting that it can do testicular damage and may actually stay in the testicles longer. That's pretty crazy stuff. And again, for it
could
not
be
to be
sterilizing people.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen, I know Jones is talking about that. I've got to see.
Well, I did see one study saying not only does it affecting the testes, but that they're I mean, I don't know if they've proven it conclusively, but they were definitely looking into the possibility that people have been, inadvertently sterilized through it. Which, if that does prove out to be true, to me, that's more in line with what you were just saying. The bioengineered aspect of it, the fact that there's multiple strains that appear to be different from maybe one coast to the other, as well as different countries. So yeah, I agree with you that the virus is real. Now, people can debate about, okay, well, does that mean that germ theory is wrong or it's terrain? I mean, those are separate conversations almost, because whatever it is, something is going around and is getting people sick. Now, we can argue about maybe it's worse than what they're saying or it's not as bad. I think it depends on where you're at, it depends on really where you're at. Every area is not being hit exactly the same. And also the governments aren't responding exactly the same. But overall, it does seem that we can see that the strongest theories that I've seen go to the bioengineered, to the, some sort of engineered weapon or, virus, whatever you want to call it. And then the theories get less credible the further you go along from there. Now, again, I want to make it clear, though, to anybody listening that I'm not saying, and it should be clear that anybody knows my work, that 5G, EMFs, glyphosate, all the extra things that we're talking about are not causing extra harm that's weakening the body and making it more susceptible, so that even people who might be young and appear on the surface healthy, but maybe these people are filled with fluoridated water and they are exposed to all kinds of pesticides on the food they eat, and they're surrounding themselves with, there's a lot of different factors that play in here. And I think that that's another key area of research that maybe down the line, or whoever has the time, we should key on that, the synergistic effects of all these things together. And that, again, though, to me, would lend itself towards some sort of engineered thing that could potentially have been released by somebody who I don't claim to know, China, US, who knows, you could argue population control. I'm speculating here because we don't have that evidence. But if we find the evidence that says, look, people are being sterilized, it's killing off people who are immune suppressed and people who are old, people who are unfit, people who just have pre-existing conditions. Well, it's not hard to make that argument.
And that's a great point, because now, as it was authoritative sources were not saying this could be a bioweapon, but now the Epic Times documentary has gone kind of viral. And although it has good information in it, it points directly at the Wuhan lab in China. And the other thing is, look, we know that bioweapons programs have been going on for decade upon decade upon decade. And we have plenty of minions of the predator class that have pontificated on paper of using biological warfare against people. So it doesn't have to be a nation state. These are think tank groups. It doesn't have to be the Wuhan lab in China. But now it's becoming more acceptable because Hannity is spreading a narrative that, wait a minute, this virus did leak out of the Wuhan lab, but it's not a bioweapon. They were actually trying to make a vaccine. See, they're trying to do good, and then it leaked out. And the real thing is that China are such liars and fucktards that it's their fault for not telling us it was killing all these people. And I just don't buy that either, because they also are promoting the idea that somehow this bioweapon leaked out via an animal to human transmission. And again, I've seen zero evidence of that. The pangolin theory, anything. Again, with that HIV sequence inserted. Now you have the Lancet study. Now you have the 2008 Nobel Prize winner coming saying, listen, that cannot happen without equipment. I find it extremely hard to believe that the way that they would release that, especially if we have now 3 different confirmed strains of it, would be through one animal in one place. And that doesn't mean it has to be, the CIA, the FBI, the Mossad, the CCP. It doesn't have to be any of those things. So wrapping it up, Derek.
Bill Gates.
What's that? Well, the thing is, look, that's why we do the Event 201, because I'm not going to sit here and suck Bill Gates' nuts, but I'm not going to say, Gates thought it up. I don't know that, he's the guy at the top of the predator class. Like I've said for now a while, who knows? It could be somebody like Prince Philip that's had a wet dream to take out a large hunk of civilization for a while. And he's like, fuck it. I'm not going to live forever. I'm going to pull the trigger. I could die tomorrow. Shit, let's do it. You know what I mean? It could be a George Soros type. I'm not accusing any of them, but I'm saying that these are the ones that are public eugenicists that have literally bathed themselves in the idea of population control and had wet dreams over this. So, Derek, it's theconsciousresistance.com, brother. And close it out. What do you want people to know the most?
Well, I appreciate that you're emphasizing that it doesn't necessarily have to be a state actor that would be that could have released this. And yeah, for people, it's hard for some folks to understand this. I think maybe generally our audience is aware of this, but Bill Gates is not the hero he's being promoted as. Again, that doesn't mean we have conclusive evidence this is him or Soros, whoever. People's words, read, listen to what they say, and you can clearly see who's a eugenicist and who thinks that eliminating portions of the population is a positive thing. So don't trust either one of us on that. Just read what they have to say. Now, of course, there are going to be some people who don't want to listen right now. Again, the technocrats are being promoted as the heroes, that they're here to the rescue, the Zuckerbergs and the Bezos and the Gates and all them. That's something we need to push back again. Like I mentioned, I came here to Mexico not because I'm running away or abandoning the United States. I still have family and friends and lots of people I love and care about there. I'm out here to try to network with people. We've been working with. I've probably got about 60 to 100 emails from people from France, Australia, the US, elsewhere, who are terrified of what's going on in their countries. Some who are considering coming to Mexico, others who are just building locally. But the point here is that if this is not the final step towards, the New World Order or just the technocratic state, this is definitely a giant leap in that direction. And anybody who's hearing this, who's awake and who knows what's going on, let's get past arguing and debating just about the various theories about the virus for a moment and focus on that what is happening is very real. And unless we come together in a very big way right now and focus on spreading information like we never have before, getting out there in the streets if you can and passing out flyers with the Invisible Empire, passing out DVDs with Invisible Empire and stuff like that, getting the information out there, even with social distancing. We need to make an effort more than ever, because if not, things are going to get very, very dark very soon, and there might not be any way to go back to turn things around, or at least it will become very difficult to do so. The solutions they're presenting, immunity passports, drones overhead, these things are not optional. These are going to be mandatory, and eventually we might end up with a mandatory vaccination, or at least they'll make it very difficult to operate in the world. Don't have that certificate, that passport, that badge. So I just want to emphasize that there's a lot of awesome things happening right now. People are waking up. People are questioning. There's also so much bad information. Think critically like you never have before. Question everything and try to present the best information you find to the people you care about. Don't come at them with this, the most extreme thing you find. Even if you believe that, start somewhere a little bit more sane and rational and try to reach them, because it's just crucial right now. I mean, I know that Jason, that you and myself and others, we are motivated by trying to change things and trying to get people to listen. So please treat this as more than just some infotainment, conspiratainment that you watch on YouTube. We're doing this because we want to get the information out there, because we are battling against these YouTube technocrats that want to censor us. And so please, please, please do something. Get active in some way, whatever you can, and start spreading information. Thank you, brother.
I thank you, man, and hopefully we're going to do this a lot sooner than later. Maybe get at each other in a month, and hopefully things are going to be looking a little bit brighter, but who knows? Who knows we're going to be in a month? It's interesting times. Guys, Derek Bros is the Conscious Resistance. Go subscribe to his channel right now. Thank you, brother. And by the way, his 5G work is absolutely incredible. I want to reiterate this. A lot of emails and passwords from the CDC, the WHO, the NIH, the World Bank, and the Wuhan Institute of Virology leaked out early this morning. 12, 13 hours ago. Whether or not people got those emails, what's going to happen in the coming days, I don't know. But this has been scrubbed everywhere. See if you can find this. This is some pretty amazing information. If you like groundbreaking information, I'm not about left or right. It's about right and wrong. Love to have Derek on. Derek has some great perspectives. We don't have to agree all the time. But I'll tell you what, I agree that guy is doing some great work. So remember, I'm a documentary filmmaker. You don't even have to hand out Invisible Empire. You could be giving out the digital links, that, Shade the Motion Picture, Fable Enemies, Loose Change, Final Cut, all available free right here on this channel. Thumbs this video up, subscribe, join the Burmese Brigade. They're dropping like flies because a lot of people don't love my reporting because it doesn't go with a narrative that they enjoy. And I'm not enjoying this narrative whatsoever, by the way. Let's see, there we go, load it up. But it's the real one. Live and exclusive today. It's free. You can go check it out. I did the Kim Jong-un during COVID 1984 video. Go sign up at Rockfin for free. Follow me. And all the free stuff is free. And then we got the premium stuff for the premium people. So make sure to check that out. I'm also on Minds.com. I got to continue to do more here on Minds. Man, everything is just unloading. It looks like it's restart time with the Google Chrome. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to continue to tell the truth. We'll see you on the flip.